Hi all, I hope you're doing well and welcome to this Cine Circle event where we'll be discussing finding work as a freelance filmmaker. So first things first, it would be great if you could all give me a thumbs up in the comments, if you can see me okay, if you can hear me okay, and just to make sure that everything is working technically. And then we'll get started in just a moment. Just to let everyone know, throughout this chat, throughout this entire event, feel free to ask any questions, leave any comments through the chat, whether you are watching this on YouTube or in our Facebook group. Feel free to just let us know if you have any questions, if you'd like any feedback on anything. And I can see some thumbs up, which is great. There is going to be a slight delay between what you guys hear, about 20 or 30 seconds. So if you ask any questions or if there are any technical issues and you let us know in the comments, we'll probably know about it about 30 seconds later. So that said, I'd love to introduce our guest today, Laura Davis.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Very good, very good. So first things first, it'd be great if you could maybe just introduce yourself, let us know who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Laura Davis and I'm the managing director of the Crewing Company. The Crewing Company look after freelancers in media, covering everything from pre to post-production. So we have around 700 freelancers on our books, and we work with all sorts of clients, so broadcast, corporate, commercial, advertising, you name it, we pretty much work on it. So we have lovely big clients like ITV and BBC and Channel 4 and that kind of thing. But then we also have like Saatchi and Saatchi and VCCP Kin and Maverick Advertising, and then corporate companies like HSBC, Lloyds Bank, BlackRock Investment Banking. So it's a real array of kind of freelance work that we get, but also and freelancers that we have on the books and their skill set, but also a real array of clients. So we're kind of placing people every day somewhere, and that can be either for a day or 3 months, but all freelance work, basically. We're based in London and Hackney Wick, but we're all currently remote in various places around the UK, hoping to get back there fairly soon. But that's kind of us in a nutshell.
Okay, great, thanks. So for everyone listening, feel free to also just write in the comments, let us know kind of who you are, what you do, how long you've been in the industry for, so that we get a rough idea of, of who's watching and how we can tailor the talk to you as well. So throughout today, we want to really discuss kind of the entire journey of, finding work, keeping the work, and sort of and being able to have consistent work throughout your work as a freelancer. So we'll be discussing if you are at the very beginning, where you can find work, what kind of things you need to consider before you start looking for work, and for everyone who might have been in the industry for a couple of years, perhaps some strategies on how you can get clients consistently and so on. So let's start at the very beginning, perhaps. If someone is completely new to the industry, and they want to become a freelance filmmaker, what are some of the things that they should consider? For example, how important is it to know exactly what you want to do from the very start?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and it's so daunting. I think first of all, stepping out into a new industry, whatever that industry is. And I think when you think in your mind, oh, I've got to make a decision, some people are so sure, I want to be a director and that is where I'm heading. And that's brilliant. It's great to have that. But if you're not sure, that's fine as well. I certainly wasn't sure when I graduated. I never thought I'd become an MD of a company. I did photography at university. So I think if you're not sure, that there's nothing wrong with that, and it's about being open to kind of the avenues that you might end up going down that you wouldn't ever consider. But if you are sure, or even if you've got an inkling, I think it's important to remember to kind of stay confident in that as well. So let's say you want to be a producer, director, a self-shooter, or something like that, but you're kind of like not sure, but maybe it's because you don't feel that you can. But you can, and just try and stay confident with that and stay consistent with that. Don't let other things sway you, into an area that you don't necessarily want to go down. I think there are some people that I've met who end up feeling a bit pigeonholed, and that's just because of the sort of opportunities that have come their way and they've taken that. And sometimes that's really not a bad thing, but I think it's about constantly reviewing yourself and saying, am I going to be happy going down this route, or do I need to take a leap of faith here? Obviously, lots of things come into account there, like finances, current circumstances. Who could have predicted this last year? I'm sure a lot of people stayed in jobs that they may not have wanted to, and some people have thrived, and it's been an opportunity for them to really develop skills that they hadn't had time to before. So there's a balance. But in answer to your question, I think it's fine to not know where you're going to go, because that's quite exciting. And I think you don't know what skills you're going to pick up along the way.
Indeed. I never thought when I started off in industry that I'd end up in marketing, but that seems to be my path in doing film events. And I think also there is this constant struggle that filmmakers deal with which jobs pay well and which jobs are the creative ones that enable them to do what they really want to do, which is always something. So I think that this kind of tip of constantly reviewing where you are and what jobs you're taking on is definitely great.
Yeah.
And let's maybe have a chat about starting off with where can filmmakers, freelance filmmakers find work, and perhaps we can start off with just kind of generally listing some of the different ways that you can find work as a freelancer, whether it's agents, websites. Like what are some of the different ways that you can find work as a filmmaker and freelancer?
Yeah. Really, really great question. I think there's so many avenues to go down this one. And, at the end of the day, building your client base isn't an easy task at the best of times. So it's about branching out in a few different areas. So I would say, obviously I'm going to say this, but it does work, is joining an agency or finding an agency that you can join. So like the Crewing Company, but there are other agencies out there too. Just kind of like on the side of that is that our agency, we bring on people with at least 2 to 5 years experience. So we might not be the best agency for somebody just graduating, for example. But the reason for that is because our client requirements, they expect a certain level of experience before we put freelancers with them. So that's why we wouldn't want somebody to come on the books and then for us not to be able to offer them work, basically. But I'm sure there are other agencies out there that probably cater more to like graduates or people that have only been in the industry for a year or so. So agencies, definitely looking to see what agencies are right for you as well, because some agencies charge a monthly fee, and that's fine, but they guarantee a kind of certain number of days of work a month. So you need to weigh up that option too. Is that something you want to go down, a route you want to go down? Then there's agencies like the Crewing Company, who we don't charge a monthly fee, but and there's no joining fee or anything like that. But if we get you work, then the difference between what the client is charged and what the freelancer takes home is 16%. So, and that 16% is our margin, basically. But we work with the client and with the freelancer to figure out the best rates possible. So that's just kind of to give you a rough idea of how an agency like us would work. And there are other ones out there. So joining an agency is great because they've already got, we already have a pool of clients. So our job is to basically introduce freelancers to clients and create some really nice, strong relationships that have longevity, and just and help our freelancers progress in their career and progress their skill set. So that's why agencies are good to go with. And yes, it might take a bit off your day rate, or you might have to pay a monthly fee, but to open up to established relationships with clients already, clients come to the Crewing Company because they trust us and they trust who we're going to place with them. So it's kind of opening up an area that you may not have gone with anyway. A lot of our freelancers, they have told us, I would never have met that client if you hadn't introduced me, or I've never even considered working for them, and that kind of thing. So it kind of branches that out. So there's agencies. Then there are, I think, platforms such as Fiverr, and I think there's other places like Juno and Worksum, and they are another kind of freelance agency, but there's less of there's not an account manager necessarily to go to. You just sign up to their website, and then jobs come through. You apply for those jobs. As far as I know, that's how that works. So that's another angle to that. But I don't think there's any, they don't necessarily need people with 2 to 5 years experience or more. They want anybody that can come on effectively. And then just looking at clients as well, like looking and thinking about what type of client do I want to work for? Do I want short form, branded content, commercials, advertising, and then look to see what clients are out there that do those kind of projects and creative projects, and then follow them on LinkedIn, follow them on Twitter, follow them on Instagram, follow a creative pool is another one. And you can see what they're up to. And then often they might post jobs kind of over their own websites through their social media, but also you get an idea of what they're doing. What are they expecting? What's the level of work they need at the moment? What do you think they might be needing? And then reaching out, like good old fashioned, dropping them an email, see if you can find an email on LinkedIn or on their website. A lot of people now list their email addresses, and just dropping your CV in a really polite way and, not too pushy, just, I'm here, I'd love to work for you. Tell them why you want to work for them. Say, I've just seen this project you've done. I think it's amazing. I'd love to work on something like that. I'll be part of that growth in your company or whatever it might be. But yeah, good old fashioned like networking in that sense. And then there are other places, like there's Facebook groups. So people who know people in TV, I think is one. I can't recall many others, but there are lots of Facebook groups that you can join. I think just, searching, if you're an editor, junior editor, type in junior editor groups, see what comes up there. Because I think sometimes what happens is freelancers will say, they'll go on these groups and they'll say, I've just been offered this job, I can't actually do it, can somebody else do it? And then you get recommended through other people, and then you're just talking to others and you're meeting others in that way. I'm sure you've probably all heard of it, but there are job sites like Mandy.com and Grapevine, and then just anything like that. So you're seeing what's out there, and those job sites aren't just permanent roles. They could be fixed term contracts, or some of them are even just like a couple of weeks. So yeah, I think it's about spreading yourself a bit amongst kind of different areas. So agencies, platforms, social media, and then good old fashioned contacting that client, but making sure you're actually really doing your research beforehand, because they don't want somebody that's just throwing their CV out everywhere willy-nilly. They want somebody that's invested in their company and know what they're doing and are interested in the content they're creating as well.
Yeah. Great. And I really, I want to kind of dive a little deeper into every single one of these strategies. I see that everyone's asking some great questions over here, which I'll get to in a moment. And actually, we've got one which I want to start off with a little bit of a sort of a juicier, more controversial question of, taking on lower paid jobs or even unpaid jobs at the start. And I'm just wondering what your opinions on that are.
Yeah, that's such a hard one, isn't it? I know. That
Indeed. You have to be very diplomatic in the way that you phrase it.
It's really difficult, because I know I struggled with that when I left uni. Like the amount of jobs I could see that were like unpaid. Here's, get some experience, and it's like, oh, I've just graduated. Like, I really want to just do that. And you're trying, you have to look after yourself, and if you're only supporting yourself, it can be really difficult. So it depends. I personally don't think it should be a thing, because everybody has value. Like, however experienced you are, you have value. Like, you're bringing something and you're allowing that content to be created. So it's really unfortunate that those unpaid jobs are out there. I think if you're going to accept, but they are there, and I don't think they're going to go away anytime soon. So I think if you are going to accept them, just make sure financially you're able to do that, and that you can support yourself for that week or that month. I mean, it is be tough, but I think just make sure that you're in a good place to do that, and that you're not putting yourself out financially by taking on those roles. And just make sure it's a job that you're going to consider, like, I'm going to network and I'm going to use this to my advantage too. And, I'm going to make a good impression, and I'm going to be friendly to others and talk to other people about their experiences and find out who's good to work with, who isn't, and use it and get the value in that sense. But just make sure you're not undervaluing yourself by then not being able to, like eat for a week. So I think it's really a personal choice on that one. I think it is a shame because everybody, as I say, adds value. Lower paid jobs as well. That's really tricky. We get a lot of clients coming, not a lot, but like we do get some clients coming to us like, oh, it's a low paid job, but it's going to be really great and it's great experience. But they want somebody that's got the skill set. And I think in that case, know your worth and don't feel afraid to turn away jobs as well. Especially let's say you've built up some savings or you've got another job on the side, maybe not, it's not to do exactly what you want, but you're there. Don't be afraid to say, no, actually I'm worth more than that. So for now, I'm going to turn that away. I think there's a really difficult dynamic with that, because sometimes I've seen people do a lower paid job, but then they've negotiated their rate higher. So I think if you're going to take if you are going to take that, maybe set yourself a month or a week or 6 weeks or whatever it might be and say, okay, I'm happy to do this, but I'm going to try and renegotiate my rate 1 month in. Or you could even tell the client that from the word go. So you say, look, I'm happy to do it on this occasion. I actually feel like I'm bringing quite a lot of my skills to this, and I'm going to go, I feel like it's probably a job where I'm going to be doing over and above the hours. So I would like to review my rate in a month's time or in 2 weeks' time, once I've got a better understanding of the job itself, because you don't want to get caught in a loop then of, right, they paid me that, so that's all they're ever going to offer. You need to, it's again, reviewing, right, I've done that now, but I don't need, and you might get to a point where you say, okay, that's fine. If you can't pay me anymore, I think I'm going to have to call it a day on this particular project. And then you move on to another one. But it's reviewing your worth, reviewing where you are financially, and knowing, is it going to be value to you genuinely in the longer term?
Yeah, definitely, and I agree with all of those points. I think it's important to note, especially at the start of your career, that perhaps you don't, the money isn't the most important thing for your first few jobs, but you should still definitely consider what you're really getting out of the job, because you will definitely be able to get a lot of unpaid jobs that are worth absolutely nothing, and you'll be able to find some unpaid jobs which will get you very well paid jobs in the future. And it's knowing the difference between those, finding out who is the director, who's the producer perhaps on a film, or who is how big is the company that you're going to be working for, and making a decision based on that. So I think that's that's a great point there.
Exactly. And just to add to that as well, so you never know who you're going to meet on these projects, and that can be an unpaid one, a really well paid one. You just don't know who's going to be on set with you and who you're going to be working alongside, who you might see again. So you just never know. And I think it's important to be open-minded and not if it is a lower paid job, like perhaps not go into it with a judgmental mind, and just kind of keep your mind open. But again, keep reviewing. Is this right for me?
And now kind of diving a little bit deeper into each one of those strategies that you mentioned, sort of starting off perhaps with agencies, perhaps the most sort of interesting thing would be, are there certain red flags that that filmmakers can pick up on when finding their agency and going, oh, okay, I definitely want to avoid this one? For example, say they're I don't know, asking for a monthly fee and not guaranteeing any work, or are there any of these kinds of things that an agency can say that would be concerning?
Yeah, I haven't heard of any, and I'm not just saying this because I'm part of an agency, but I've never really heard like horror stories, let's say, but I'm sure that there are ones out there. But exactly like you say, I think if they're asking for a monthly fee but they're not guaranteeing work, you need to see, perhaps you could always look online and see if anybody else has worked for that agency. Are there reviews of that agency? How long have that agency been around? Are they established? Are they known in the industry? I think it's important to go with some really trusted agencies out there, rather than anybody that doesn't necessarily have the contacts that you'd be looking for. So yeah, I think like if you do come across ones that are monthly fees or asking for any kind of money up front, then you just need to be mindful of what they're going to be offering back, certainly. It's difficult because, so for example, and for complete honesty and transparency, is that we have almost 700 people on the books, but we don't get all of them work because, but that's not for lack of trying, and sometimes it's because half of those freelancers are busy themselves and they don't really need us. We're just that extra pair of eyes and ears for them. But some of them, we get work every single day, and that all their work goes through us. So I think, but we try and review kind of continuously with our freelancers, and we do check in with them and say, look, we haven't managed to get you a job in the last year. How are you getting on? You know, is there anything we can do differently? Can you send us a new CV or reel or whatever? And then we try and speculatively send them to clients if we're really trying to get them work. But, you know, we try and review it. And if we really aren't getting them and it's not successful for them, then it's about sort of, again, reviewing where you're at. And if you're joining an agency and they haven't got you a job in a year, then it might just be worth saying to them, look, is there anything I can do? Can I readjust my CV? Can I readjust my showreel? Can you please send me to some more clients? Who have you got out there? You know, there's a level of commitment to be on an agency's books. And I think if you're not being rewarded with that work, it can feel a bit disheartening. But, you know, for honesty, like we don't get everybody work, but it's a bit of a mixture of reasons. And but then some we get every day. So
yeah. Okay. And another question that I want to ask you regarding agencies, because this is the one thing that I did hear some horror stories about, actually not necessarily for crew, mainly for sort of acting agencies and so on, is the payment terms in terms of how long after the job you get paid, because that's something that I've heard some people waiting, 9 to 12 months to get paid for a job sometimes.
Yeah, no, that I'm glad actually you brought that up, because yes, I've heard things like that too, and I've heard of clients, taking months to pay, and that's really not great for your own cash flow and being able to live like sustainably and be able to plan and things like that. So just as an example, we pay our freelancers within 21 days, whether we're paid or not by our client. So just to give you a bit of background on that, we invoice the client on behalf of the freelancer. And as soon as the client pays us, we pay our freelancer. But if the client pay us after 21, so if they haven't paid us within 21 days, we pay our freelancer despite whether or not we've been paid, and we do all the chasing of the client. So the freelancer will be guaranteed paid within 3 weeks, and most of the time it's sooner. Most of the time it's within a week or 2 weeks. And we also do, and other agencies will do this too, do an early payment option. So if you do want to get paid within a couple of days, you just you get a little bit less take home. But that just means you're paid guaranteed within like 1 or 2 days rather than potentially waiting 3 weeks. But there are clients and other agencies that don't have that in place. And that is a real shame, because freelancers have done the work. They deserve to be paid. And we're real strong believers of that, obviously. But I would say with those, so if you did have an agency or a client, I know that some people add interest onto their invoice. So if it's not been paid by a certain date, they're going to add a little bit more because it's taken that long. But I think it's about being consistent with it shouldn't be down to you. It should be down to their accounts department. But unfortunately, not everybody and not every client is as organized as that. So it could be really simple. I think it could be something like they've just lost the PO number, or nobody's communicated with them. And so I think it's about giving them the benefit of the doubt, but making sure you're consistent with your communication. So checking in, if it's overdue, letting them know it's overdue now. I'll check in again in a week, and then check in again in a week, and then keep that paper trail, because then you've got a lot of leg to stand on as well. And then, it's really difficult if it gets much further down the line. I don't know what it's like for a freelancer, but if we were ever in a position as a company where we weren't getting paid and it had been months and months and months, we'd probably put like, I don't want to say the word threat because that's a horrible word, but, you know, we'd probably say something about we need to take legal action, or we will, that will be our next step, basically. You know, if you're owed money, you're owed money. But one thing I would say with that is, obviously, as an agency, we create booking forms. So before a job is starting, you get a booking form, and that lays out your payment terms, the rate you're going to be paid, and everything. So I think if you are going to be booked with an agency or with a client directly, get some kind of booking form, some kind of confirmation in writing that you will be paid at this time. And if you don't see anything about payment terms or payment days or whatever, then you need to kind of mention that to them and highlight to them, basically. But be consistent and stay polite, because it can just be a really simple mistake. But I think, and picking up the phone, giving them a call, asking them, and highlighting.
It's also, I think, really worth kind of mentioning, you know, there are certain clients who won't pay you because, you know, certain errors, you know, in terms of accounting. There's some who will simply try to pay you as, you know, as late as possible. But there's also, you know, for example, I used to work as a producer when I was freelancing, and I was working for, you know, Warner Brothers Records, doing music videos for them. I would hire the crew, I would create all the contracts, and with them, I would get half of the budget for the actual music video. I would get half of the budget once the music video was finished. Now, the issue with that is that the music video was normally finished long after, a month after the shoot, which meant that I never had the money to pay a lot of the people who were on set for a month or longer. So I would essentially pay them from my own pocket. And it's fine when you have the ability to do that, but except for that, I think it's just keeping that kind of friendly tone, but you know, making sure you're strict, but you know, you don't just accuse someone of stealing from you, you know, from the start, because that, you know, never does any good.
Exactly. And I think you're right. It's like staying assertive, but because, you know, you have a right to be paid, but understanding that that person might be the middle person. There might be somebody who is literally waiting on being paid, and maybe they're feeling really embarrassed, or maybe they're feeling very stressed by it. And I think particularly if it's a producer, you might work with that producer again in the future, and they may work for a different company who pays really well. So bear in mind that a lot of people you're talking to are freelance as well, and they will move from client to client. So if you're rude to them in one client, and then they move to one that pays really well and pays on time and has lots of benefits to working with them, then they might not choose you because they think, oh, you know, you're a little bit out of sorts, like you're a bit rude. But it's understandable as well when you're stressed about finances. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So let's maybe move a little bit to, you know, talking about what kind of assets you should have when you're applying for a job. So here, kind of specifically talking about the CV and the showreel. What are some of the things, you know, that, you know, starting off maybe with the CV, what are some of the most common mistakes that you see with a CV, and perhaps how is a CV different for, you know, different positions within the industry?
Yeah, so I would say, and probably everyone's heard this already, but not being too long and not too wordy. So be precise. If you can have it on one page, excellent. 2 pages, I actually think is fine. I don't mind looking at 2 pages. But there are it can get difficult the longer your career develops. So you may have loads of different projects. You may have worked with so many different clients, and then you're like, I can't even fit this all on 2 pages. I'm now at 8 pages. In that case, I would create a credit list rather than a CV. Or you have your CV with your main sort of projects on, or the main employment history, but then you've got a wider credit list that lists all of your credits. But then also you want to have different genres as well. So if you've worked on broadcast, then you want a genre of that. If you've worked on advertising, then you want that genre. And so it's really clear. You basically want it to be as easy as possible for the client to see what your skills are and what your experience is. So, you know, your name at the top, and then putting your job title. But this is a little bit tricky, because what I have seen before is somebody once came to me, they graduated and their job title said director. And that's what they want to be, and that's what they have done at uni, and that's what a lot of their projects have been, and their side projects. And that's fine if you're applying to a director role. But I think if you're applying to a runner role or something that's like a more entry-level position, then just change that. That's okay to aspire to that, absolutely, in the future, but I would change your job title to fit with what job you're applying for instead. And then as you develop, adjust that job title. You might turn into an assistant director and then put that, and then assistant director / director, and then so on. So I think it's important what you don't want to do is, I think the reason that's important is because you don't want a client to see your CV and be like, oh, they want to be a director, they don't really want to be a runner, or they want to be a director, they don't really want to do this. Yes, okay, you don't want to be a runner forever, but at the same time, there has to be an element of like, I still want this position, even though it's not exactly what I want to do, so I can get me to that stage. So yes, so name, job title, nice and clear, and then skills. I would put in your skills fairly near the top. So like really concise bullet points, nothing too wordy. If you're an editor, you could just say Premiere, Adobe Premiere and Final Cut or something. Short form, social media content, great at communication, any skills that you might have. Or if you're a camera op, then you might want to say, I work with C300s, Sony's, Alexa's, whatever it might be. Like, you just put everything there that you have skills in. And then down from that should be either your credit list or your employment history, and then education, and then some hobbies as well, if you like. So it's just basically trying to make it clear and concise, so nothing too wordy. If you also, I know we're talking mainly about freelance, but let's say you end up in lots of different permanent positions. If you're repeating, say you've got one permanent role at the top and you've written quite a lot of what you've done there, and then you've got another permanent role underneath from a couple of years before, but you've done the same kind of thing in each one, you don't want to repeat yourself. So just try and keep it nice and concise. I was a production manager for this, and I had to deal with contracts and budgets and negotiating and things like that. And then if you've done the same in the next one, try and pick out things that you wouldn't have said in the first one, and so on. So there's less repetitiveness, but 2 pages maximum. 1 is great. And just making it really clear for the client to read, basically. And then
in terms of the CV, just got a couple of questions, and I wanted to ask one as well. To what extent you should have multiple CVs for for different things, because the thing that I always saw as a producer is someone would send me a CV where they are writer / director / producer / camera operator / editor / runner.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that was at the top of my list to talk about, and then I completely forgot. So I understand what you mean. So there will be jobs where they want somebody who is a self-shooting producer director who script writes and can edit, and there will be jobs like that. And in that case, fine, put everything on there. But I think it's really good, and we actually do this for our freelancers. We might have 2 or 3 CVs for them. So that goes for different jobs. So if you're an editor and a camera operator, you might want to have 1 CV with your camera operating and editing work on it combined. And then you might want to have one with just your editing, and then the other one with just your camera op work. But then within that, you might want to say, if you're on your camera op CV, you might want a skill of can edit, in Premiere. And the same with your editor one, you might want to say can shoot with C300, because as well, you never know. Somebody might be like, oh, we need an editor, a sole editor, that's it. And then when you're on the project, it might be like, actually, the project has changed slightly. Now we need somebody that can shoot as well, or can understand shooting. So when they're editing, they can kind of understand why a camera op would have shot in that way, and that type of thing. So having multiple CVs is perfect, because it saves you time in the long run as well. You don't want to keep catering your CV to every single job you apply to. Like, absolutely, you should tweak it and add certain things or take things out that aren't necessarily relevant. But it will save you time if you have 3 different ones and you think, oh yeah, I know which CV to send for that one. That sounds great. I feel like I was going to say something else on that. Can't remember. If I remember it, I'll let you know.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions. The first one is about, your sort of credit list and whether, if that's not all on your CV, is it better to have that online somewhere, link it on your CV to a website or have it on paper, or what would be the best way to do that?
I suppose you could do it in a couple of ways, really. I think having something online is good and a quick link that they can just tap on. You could say at the bottom of the CV, a further credit list available, should you want it. But with that, there's always a risk that somebody then can't be bothered to ask for it. Or you could send your CV and credit lists. So like you could attach your CV. So if they want to just look at your CV, fine. And then if they're interested in that, they have these credit lists in a PDF document available as well to look at. So a bit of a mixture. But that's a really good question, actually, because I hadn't really thought about that. But with our freelancers, we might have their CV and then credits just like flowing, but we try and keep it to just like a couple of pages. But I think as well, it's about having what I would actually say is have a master document that only you have access to, and put all of your credits on there. So every time you work on a project, add it to that master document. And then, but in those genres as well. So short form, long form, branded content, behind the scenes, social media, whatever it might be, whatever genres you want, keep adding to that. And then every time you send a CV, if it's for a job for an advertising agency, then just pull all those credits over to your CV so they're on the CV. So you kind of got like a master document that only you have access to. You keep adding to it, and then you pick and choose what you want to pull over from there onto your CV. Or you just have a full credit list, and you have it as your full credit list, and you send a CV along with a full credit list.
Okay. Yeah. And we got a final question over here, which is, do you use ATS for CV screening?
ATS, what's that?
I think it's some sort of CV screening software. Pick out key information about you, your experience and skills, and make sure you match the job criteria. So I'm guessing the answer is no.
Do we use ATS? Okay, I see what you mean. Yes, right. So we do. When it comes to freelancers, we have to, there's not a specific job that we're bringing them on for. We have to look at our client base. So we have to look at what our clients are asking of our freelancers, and what the what the skill set is. Have we got a lot of clients asking for Premiere editors? Have we got a lot of clients asking for PDs? If so, then we'll sort of be looking at those CVs and bringing them on. As I said before, we don't like to take people on if we can't reward them with work, because there's no point and it's disheartening. When it comes to internal recruitment, we do use this. So we've got like an internal Excel basically that lists all the skills that we need, and then we mark against it. So we say whether yes, they've got this particular skill, or they have some of it, or they don't have that, and therefore then they're not suitable for the role, or yes, they have all of that. So great, we're going to talk about having a phone interview with them, and then we'll talk about face-to-face interviews. I've actually just used it recently, but it's not, we don't use a software as such. We've taken what we know and what we've been taught recruitment-wise, and then we put it into our own format. So.
Okay, great. Yeah. And now let's maybe move on to showreels. And again, what's the ideal length, what you should include, how should you format it, and so on.
Yeah, so showreels are such a brilliant way to obviously showcase your skill set. And I know not every single discipline creates reels. So that I know there are certain, I think like, just trying to think of one now, but like makeup artists, they may not have a show reel, they might have a portfolio instead. But when it comes to editors, camera ops, producers, directors, anything where you can really showcase your skills is great. So I would say anywhere between 1 minute and preferably under 2 minutes. So no longer than that, really, if you can, because people just take too long. They don't have the time to review. I've received an 8-minute show reel before, and I'm like, this is basically like a short film. If you have the time, then great, but we don't always have the time. So for us in particular, we want to see reels that are under 2 minutes. I like the ones, and this is a kind of preference thing, but like the ones that are kind of punchy, and they just they're not too quick, but especially if you're an editor, I think what's really good is if you can edit to some music, and then you sort of go between, you know, your advertising work and then like commercial and social content and things like that, and using that and using the music and keeping it kind of engaging, so being as engaging as possible. Not being too repetitive, and that can be difficult when you haven't worked on masses of things, but don't try and show the same bit of footage over again or from the same project. Try and keep it varied if you can. Some people put up, you know, they'll put it into genres as well. So they'll start their showreel and say branded content, and then they'll have like 30 seconds of branded content. Then they'll say, you know, social media campaigns. Then they have 30 seconds of social media campaigns, and so on. So sometimes people like to do that. That we have compositors on the books as well, and some of their reels are brilliant because they'll show a shot before they've composited and then after. And I love seeing that because you really get to see what their skills are like. It's so like visible, obviously. So yeah, keeping it short and sweet, engaging. Put your name at the beginning and your job title, and then have all your and also have your, you know, contact details and things like that. Do the whole reel, and then do the name again at the end with all your contact details as well. Mm-hmm. So I think that's probably the best way. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. It should definitely be under 2 minutes. I have definitely seen majority of showreels that have ever been sent to me were over 2 minutes, but I understand the need for them to be shorter. So that's definitely really interesting. And we had a question over here, and I want to, you know, can't really do a talk about, you know, finding work without mentioning COVID during you know, this year. So, you know, the first question over here was, you know, how is work of an agency changed after the COVID pandemic and the, you know, increasing frequent use of, you know, smart and remote working? So, you know, how has your process changed, and how have the client requirements changed in the last year?
Yeah, so for like full honesty as well, because that's what we all want. So last year at the very beginning of the pandemic, so we were having roughly between 85 to 145 jobs a week come our way for our freelancers. And then when the pandemic hit, it went right down to 15 1 week. And it hovered around there for a little while. And then luckily over the year, we've built up, and now we're roughly around 55 to 65 a week. So we're getting there, and we're getting there slowly. So some trends that I've seen are some of our freelancers have gone permanent. And I think just because they have had a very uncertain year and a permanent role has come to them, and they've just thought, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. And that's fine, because obviously then they get to experience a team and they get regular income. And like, there are some really brilliant permanent jobs out there now. And I think you never have to stay in that for long. If freelancers start to pick up and they want to revisit that world, then like that's there, which is great. Clients have mainly asked for, I suppose the majority of our work has been motion graphics designers and editors, because that can all be done remotely. Most editors and motion graphics designers have their own software, After Effects, Cinema 4D, Premiere, Final Cut, that type of thing. So we have seen a lot of that, and most of that work has been coming our way. But we also have had camera op work and DOP work as well. And then a lot of clients have asked for people to take COVID tests beforehand, and then they practice very safe on-set behavior, like, you know, making sure there's social distancing, making sure people are constantly cleaning their hands and equipment is, you know, washed down and all that kind of thing. But yeah, I think everybody's had to adapt, haven't they, so much. And I know that a lot of our clients who were booking freelancers are working remotely, and we all have been as well. So it's proven that we can do it. I think it's just a little bit more difficult, but I actually think it's, in some ways, it's been, for some people, it's been a positive experience, because some of their work has increased because of it, because they can, you know, some people, and for example, travel, you know, like somebody that might be based in Brighton or up north can now work with London-based clients more regularly because it's all been remote. Because we used to, before the pandemic, we had some people that could only do remote work, and we really rarely got them work because the client always prefers to have somebody there with them working on a project. But now, with things like StreamYard and Zoom, and people are just much more used to dealing with each other and having meetings like this rather than having to be face to face. So, yeah.
Okay. And on that note, we've got a question over here. So the crewing company is, mostly covering just, freelancers in the UK. But actually, on the note of post-production, do you take, freelancers from around the world if it is for, remote editing jobs, for example, or is that something that you just simply don't do at the moment?
We don't at the moment, but that's so we want to focus on our UK freelancers and for right to work reasons as well. In the UK, you have to have certain amount of, information like passports, the right to work in the UK, if you're being paid by a UK company and things like that. So, but we have had freelancers that have joined us in the UK, and a lot of our freelancers aren't from the UK, and then they move elsewhere. What we say to them is, we can't guarantee work now because obviously before pandemic, especially, people wanted to do face-to-face meetings and work face-to-face, but it's always great because then if a job comes up in the country that they've moved to, like we have placed people in Paris and Amsterdam, and I think we even did one in South Africa, because our clients needed people out there, and then we happened to know freelancers that had moved out there. But at the moment, we aren't branching out to other countries to get our freelancers. One, because really the work just isn't there for us to be able to bring on more people at this stage. So we wouldn't want to dilute the work for the people already on our books by bringing on more people when our job levels aren't at the level that we're used to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
But that's not to say that other clients wouldn't consider that. So I think that the greatest thing about, doing everything remotely and people proving that it can be done is that, yes, you can work from anywhere and you can hire amazing freelancers from all over the world. And there's so much talent in the world. And I feel like that's one great thing. We might not necessarily do it, but it doesn't stop clients from branching out and looking elsewhere and really taking, and then who knows who you could meet through doing that as well. And then you might make a move to the UK at some point for a year or something.
Okay, and so we got about 10 minutes left. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to to write in the chat. But I'd like to focus a little bit on, you've got that job with someone, or you brought a client on board. What are some of the most common negative and positive feedbacks that you hear from clients? What are some of the most common reasons why they don't rehire someone, or that they say, I want this person on every single one of my projects in the future?
Yeah, so I think that it's all about being helpful, isn't it? And being polite and being friendly. And that doesn't mean you have to be super outgoing. It doesn't mean that you have to be really positive all the time or anything like that. Obviously that helps, but I think some people are shyer than others, and that's okay. But I think it's just showing that you're there and that you're helpful and you're willing to help. And I think no matter what level you are, no matter how far you've come in your career, that you still have an understanding for the people that are just starting, and that you also are happy to chip in on little bits, that whether that's just making a quick cup of tea and just noticing that everyone's really busy and being like, do you know what, I'm just going to grab everybody a cup of tea. I certainly would do that to my team. I don't care what level I'm meant to be at. I would want to do that because it's about, you're all in it together in many ways. So a real positive is when somebody is just very willing to feel like they're part of the team. They don't come in believing they know better or believing they don't know enough. It's, okay, I'm here, I want to work together with you all, and I'll do what I can to make this whole journey a little bit easier. Obviously not to your detriment. So you want to do your job and your specific job that you've been hired to do to its best ability. And then if you have more time, then great. And it's just simple things if you're meant to finish at 6 and you actually finish at 1:45, don't just leave. Like, actually say to someone, look, I've got a quarter of an hour. I don't finish till 6. Do you want me to do anything? Is there anything you need from me? And that really can go such a long way, rather than just leaving. And I'm sure most people would do that, but I think it's just those really small little acts that you can do throughout the day that might make somebody go, oh, do you know what? I really enjoyed working with them. And I think it's also about being understanding to others, having patience, and understanding that somebody might be going through a difficult time personally, and that's maybe why they're not bringing their best selves to work, and just not taking it personally. But on the other side of that, if you are being unfairly treated, or you feel like you're being bullied or something like that, God forbid, hopefully that never happens to anybody, but it can happen. And I think it's important to recognize when that's happening, and if you're being unfairly treated, to make sure there's somebody to go and talk to about that, or if not, be honest and say, look, I'm not really enjoying this, or this interaction I don't feel is going very well. How can we improve that? Mm-hmm. So yeah, and I think it's just, don't be late is one of them. Like, be early, if anything, be quarter of an hour early, make sure you're there. Be communicative, really, really get that communication down. So if somebody's asking you about, my pet hate is when we're trying to get hold of a freelancer about a job for tomorrow their book's on and I can't get hold of them, just even dropping a text, say, look, I'm just about to go on the tube for an hour. If you can't hear me, if you can't get hold of me, I will call you back. And it's just about, as always, making the client's life as easy as possible, but also your life as easy as possible, just through doing those little acts.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
One more thing on that is, as I said at the beginning, you never know who you're going to meet. So, and you never know who's worked with somebody else. So the one thing I would say is, don't talk about other freelancers in a negative light. So because you just don't know. You don't know when you'll see that person again, or when you'll see their best friend. So I think it's important just to make sure you're mindful that, you might have an opinion, but maybe not everybody will feel the same.
Yeah, and I find that especially true if you're working in indie film. In a certain, for example, you're in London, you're in indie film, you think there are tens of thousands of indie filmmakers. No, you will see someone that you know on nearly every single set, and they will know everything about you.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, keeping polite, even if sometimes you may not want to, is definitely the right way forward. And we had a couple of questions here about, locations of, where, what cities might be best for finding work and so on. So, we had a couple of people asking, saying they're considering moving to London, and they're asking if that's a good idea. And we also had, some people, saying, I live in Birmingham, for example, and I want to find, cinematography work, and, in the West Midlands, for example, and in places where there might be less work. So the first part of the question is, are there places that are a lot better than others? And then what happens if you're in one of the places that has less work, and perhaps, what are some strategies that you can use there to find consistent work?
Okay, yeah. So, predominantly, I think cities and bigger cities are always going to have more production companies, more things going on. So understandably, there's always going to be more work in those larger cities like London or Paris or Amsterdam or wherever it might be. But I think one great thing about nowadays is that actually there are things popping up all over the place. So I'm living in Plymouth at the moment, in Devon, which is like, many people might know it, many people might not, because it's really far down the country. It's very close to Cornwall, and that you wouldn't think there's much going on here, but actually there's like 2-4 broadcasters here. There's loads of different production companies popping up. There's more exciting cafes and breweries and things that I never thought would come to Plymouth are here now. So I think there are things cropping up. And I imagine in Birmingham, there's probably loads of things going on in places like that. But also, if they're not happening where you are, what's stopping you from creating that? Maybe your area needs it. Maybe you need to set up a company, or to start off as that sole trader and just build slowly on that. And you start bringing people on, you start doing little projects together, building up that hub, finding what other people are creatives living in your area that are waiting for that break to go somewhere. Well, why don't you try and do something on your own? Like, I think that would be amazing to have production companies all over the place and not just stuck to one city, which can be hard to live in. And, I love London so much, and I lived there for 9 years, and I will be going back, but it's like, there's opportunity elsewhere, and I think don't feel disheartened because it's not there.
Yeah, and we've run a couple of webinars at CineCircle on client acquisition, and which was kind of run by a great filmmaker, and he's mainly doing videography and photography, but part of his strategy was creating work that perhaps doesn't exist quite yet, and one of the strategies for that was going to events, but not filmmaking events, not media events where there is food stalls or company job fairs and all these different events that are completely non-film related, but he'll go to every single stand and say, do you need a photographer? Do you need a videographer? And talk to them that way. And you might find a lot of work if you go to these kinds of fairs and events, and a lot of them are free and they happen everywhere, not just in bigger cities, smaller events, bigger events, but you might find work where it didn't exist until you brought up the subject. So that's another kind of strategy that you could use for that.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so innovative, isn't it?
Indeed.
That's great.
And we've got another question over here, which is someone who's used to be a project manager for advertising and design, and he's asking, can I pivot to producing? And perhaps we can answer that specific question, and also we can answer what are some of the strategies if you do want to pivot to something that's less related to what you're doing right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I'm sure loads of people will come across that either now or later in their career. And I think it's never too late. It's never too late to change what you want to do. And I think a lot of the skills, particularly the Real Showman, so I don't know your real name, but that you gained as a project manager will totally help you as a producer. And I think if you can try and build on those skills and see what skills that's going to bring you value into that job that you want to go into, then utilize that. And then it might be, that you have to take a bit of a lower daily rate than you normally would, or you might have to start at a slightly junior level than you're used to. But as long as you're prepared for that, it doesn't mean that you're not going to suddenly propel in 6 months into a producer job, because you've already got that baseline of skill set. So I think it's never too late, and definitely helping to produce is a really great sort of direction to go in, I think, after you're project managed. But pivoting in general can feel difficult and very daunting. But I think, again, it's maybe getting yourself into that financial position. If you are established in your career already, say to yourself, I need to save a certain amount each month. I'm going to build up this pot, so when I do make that jump, I've got that to fall back on, or I've got that area. Or you do things in your spare time. Like a few years ago, I know we're sort of running out of time a bit, but I wanted to do more photography. So on the side of my full-time job, I ended up doing silly amount of weddings and loads of shoots I did a shoot for made.com and Bupa, and it was all in my spare time. I'm very lucky to have a full-time job, but I wondered at that time a few years ago whether that might be a career that I wanted to head into, and I'm so glad I did it, because it showed me that actually I didn't. And I was quite happy where I was, but I got the opportunity, and I did that because I just worked that extra bit harder on my evenings and the weekends for a little while before I was like, I think I'm okay. And I just love photography, and I love it for a hobby, but I don't want to do it full time.
Okay. Well, wedding photography is where the money is at. So if you're going to be a photographer, wedding photography is the right one to be, I've got to say. You'll never have to complain about the daily rates there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's just so stressful. I just found it, I think it's very stressful. But some people love it. I have friends who do it and they love it. So I'm not, there's just one for me.
So we're nearly at the end now. So I just want to ask you, you mentioned a couple of things about the current company. You mainly take people who have, at least 2 to 5 years experience. How can people get in touch? How can people apply? And what do they need to apply? What things do they need to apply?
So you can go to our website, which is thecrewingcompany.com. And then there's a register button there, and you can register your CV, all your details, upload your showreel, and that comes straight through to our team. And then our team of account managers will look at every application and see, right, what are our clients asking for at the moment, and what are we in need of, like where are we kind of lacking skills wise, and then if you kind of match that, then we would look at going forward with your application. There are a certain amount of things that we need. So we need 2 references from people once we are in that stage. We need to meet people face to face or over Zoom. We need, form of ID and candidate reg form and things like that. But I think as long as you've got a good CV and a good showreel, but if you are turned away, it doesn't mean that you're bad. It just means that we don't have that. We just don't have the jobs at that stage or that moment in time. We've turned quite a lot of people away, unfortunately, this year because of that. But that's not to say in a few months we won't need them again. So often we will always keep everybody's details on file in case we are in a position to bring more people on, unless somebody obviously says, please delete my information, and then we would do that. But yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. I mean, this was very, very insightful. I'm sure everyone learned a lot. I know I learned quite a bit. So thank you so much for coming on. It's great having you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I hope I've managed to give a bit of wisdom there. But if anybody wants to contact me, I'm on LinkedIn, and you can contact us through the website as well, and I pick up the emails as well there. So yeah, any questions that you have, I'm more than happy to spend some time answering them. So yeah, feel free to reach out.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you, honestly, for coming on. It was really great having you. And for everyone watching, we've got plenty of other CineCircle events coming up as well. So feel free to check us out on Eventbrite or at cinecircle.co.uk. Because yeah, we have quite a lot of interesting events coming up. Actually, one tomorrow on film funding, if anyone is interested in that. But yeah, Laura, thank you so much. It was great having you.
Thank you so much. And I just want to wish everybody the best of luck, and I'm sure everybody will do very well. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you guys, and take care.